This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 313 for July 16th, 2018. Happy belated International Non-Binary Day to our NB friends across the globe. You're beautiful, strong, soft, fierce, and valid. Thank you for being in the world. Today's story is Desert Dogs by Dre Silvertooth and Leanne Rose, a Cast of Wonders original, read for you by Stephanie Malia Morris. Dre Silvertooth is a writer and podcaster who enjoys playing tabletop games with their partners and showing their dog a good time. Their co-conspirator Leanne Rose pushes pixels by day and designs new worlds by night. The two live together with a motley crew of rescue animals in scorching Arizona. Stephanie Malia Morris works in a bookstore by day and a library by night, which gives her access to more books than she can possibly read over several lifetimes. She is a recipient of the Octavia E. Butler Memorial Scholarship Award and a graduate of the 2017 Clarion West Writers' Workshop. Her short fiction has appeared or is forthcoming in Faya, Apex, and Nightmare. She has narrated short fiction for Starship Sofa, Far-Fetched Fables, Uncanny, and all 4 of the Escape Artist podcasts. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Desert Dogs by Dre Silvertooth and Leanne Rose. The vast desert sprawled before Kay, burnt sienna beneath the rising sun. In the distance, derelict buildings of the old cities defined the horizon, their dark and splintered silhouettes pointing like daggers at the sky. Behind her, the city gate clanged shut with a heavy sense of finality. The outer sentries ignored her as she shouldered her supplies, food, water, and the exact number of bullets allowed for inner-city travel, and walked toward the stables. Her red cloak dragged in the sand, leaving a path in her wake like a winding snake. A half-mile out stood a small, hunched figure waiting for her. The faded blue fabric of his robes was drawn up over his face to protect from the stinging wind.
"My driving student,"
he said warmly, extending his hand as she approached.
"Mr. Jean?"
"Miss," Kay corrected, taking his hand. The touch was gentle, the skin of his hand paper smooth in a way unique to the old. His eyes crinkled with grandfatherly lines.
"You'll have to forgive me."
He released her hand to wave a few fingers in front of his milky eyes.
"My vision's not what it used to be."
Damn, Kay thought. Her informant hadn't told her the man would be blind. He also neglected to mention that he would be this old. She may have reconsidered, found a different target, if she had known. "Ah," she said out loud. The driver turned and waved for her to follow, and Kay found it a small mercy that she did not have to fake a smile. They entered a stable, cramped and dusty in the shadow of the city wall. The posted guard checked her forged papers and let them in. The room was dark, unlit but for a series of blue oval lights floating erratically at eye level. By the time shadows began to differentiate into shapes, the old man was already inside the first stall, petting an enormous lizard head. That blue, artificial glow was coming from inside the creature's mouth, spilling out over a row of razor teeth. A dozen more blue lights emanated from the mouths of similar creatures, poking their heads over the tops of stalls and bobbing them in open-mouthed excitement.
"So I'm Arlo,"
the old man said, scraping dull nails over the beast's nose and forehead.
"And this here is Sarge. We've been together since this big old desert dog was small enough to sleep on my chest."
The desert dog opened its mouth wide and closed its black eyes, tail and hips waggling in pleasure. When Kay listened closely, she could hear the clicking of mechanical parts inside its cavernous torso, implanted to combat the surface area to volume problem of genetically engineered animals so large.
"Sarge, this nice lady paid for lessons so she can become a long-haul driver like me. She's gonna help us take the shipment of filters to Guerra."
Arlo rubbed his palms over the beast's cheeks. then turned to smile at a spot a few feet to the right of Kay.
Ready to roll, sunshine?
They lifted dozens of water filters from a pallet and arranged the precious cargo across Sarge's back, strapped down with canvas and topped with a sunburnt leather saddle. Arlo's own supplies fit in a beat-up knapsack that hung behind the stirrup bar. He did not seem to travel with any sort of weapon. Kay, for her part, drew her robes up around her mouth, nose, and hair as they set off in the morning light, the grit of sand already in her teeth. Once the stables and its guards had shrunk to specks in the distance, she moved her revolver back to her hip. No point in hiding it from a blind man. The old cities had an empty, gutted sort of feel, like an insect husk or carcass that had been picked down to the bone. Kay imagined, when she closed her eyes, that she could hear the wind moving from one end of the abandoned cityscape to the other, whistling through crumbling buildings, shattered windows, and open doors like breath through an ancient ribcage. In an area that Arlo said was once downtown, where skeletal buildings crowded together, Sarge skittered up the walls to avoid chemical pools on the ground. Arlo and Kay gripped handles and pressed flat to stay seated while the world twisted and turned around them.
Cars and bikes have to navigate around the old cities,
Arlo explained.
Can't go through 'cause it's too toxic at surface level. Routes are twice as long without a desert dog.
How do you navigate blind? Kay asked the question that had been bothering her for hours. She hung on for dear life as Sarge leaped from a rusted steel balcony to an adjacent rooftop.
I can still feel light, sun rising and setting in the sky. Plus, you can smell the sulfur spill to the south. Seeing is only one of the 5 senses, Mishang.
He winked.
I've got 4 perfectly good ones, and Sarge more or less knows where to go anyway.
Kay leaned back in the saddle and thought about where she'd go with the desert dog. The farther the better, she decided. A new beginning. Loud hissing alerted her to a pack of wild dogs hanging off the side of an adjacent skyscraper, heads bobbing and throats puffed up. One was missing its tail, another an eye. All looked worse for the wear. Arlo shook his head and confirmed what Kay already knew from her research.
Desert dogs bond to another soul rarely in their lives, and without that, they go feral. Bad for everyone. Can't replace parts on a feral dog.
They moved on, both pretending not to see the stray bones and sun-cracked gas masks, their large glass eyes reflecting the sky, poking up from beneath the sand as they navigated through the poisoned relics of a world left for dead. On the second day, Kay drove. Arlo sat in the back, instructing her in a calm tone even as they nearly flipped multiple times. He talked to Kay in the same way he talked to Sarge, softly, slowly, and with absolutely no expectation of response, which was lucky, since Kay had never been much of a talker.
Getting in the long-haul trade ain't what it used to be,
he reminisced once they hit a smoother stretch of road. Flat, barren plains surrounded them for miles in every direction.
The freight corporations got greedy once they learned how valuable desert dogs could be out here. Drove all the small-time breeders straight out of business, then hiked up prices like crazy.
Kay leaned to the right, guiding Sarge around a sinkhole several yards wide.
You signed a contract with the forwarder yet, Mishang?
No. She shook her head.
Don't let him hoodwink you into a high-interest one. You'll be making payments on your dog till you're gray as me.
I won't, she said. What Kay didn't say was how her chance at even the worst of contracts went up in smoke 3 months ago, when she got picked up for smuggling in Moreno. She bribed her way out of prison time, but not a rap sheet. No lender this side of the Continental Divide would deal with a felon. When the sun was highest in the sky, they took a break to escape the heat. Kay undid the saddle and learned how to clean the sand from Sarge's ear holes, then hung a tarp up for shade.
They're expensive to raise, sure. Gotta buy new gears and heart valves as they outgrow 'em, heavy metal supplements for their bones.
Arlo threw an arm over his tired face where he lay at rest under the tarp.
But they pretty much care for themselves when they're grown. Get all their nutrients and water from eating nasties that skitter in the wastes.
As if on cue, Sarge slid past on a fat belly in the sand, snatching up something black with too many legs. Arlo laughed, and Sarge wagged like an ugly puppy. They made camp again only when the growing dark made it difficult for Sarge to see, and the plunging temperature slowed the desert dog's movements. Kay set up the tarp and blankets, then removed the saddle and cargo so Sarge could wander free overnight. Once Arlo was snoring, Kay touched her revolver, dragged her thumb over the hammer, and hardened her resolve. She was sick of fighting, sick of stealing, sick of shooting people she knew nothing about because it was worth something to someone. Death's ugly, desperate face had been her one constant companion for too many years. Tomorrow, she decided, tomorrow would be the last time. She kept telling herself that until she almost believed it. They stopped at a trading post on the morning of the third day. A rickety collection of tin-roofed shacks slouched at the foot of a red sandstone outcrop. The hard-packed dirt road that ran past the place branched out into a gravel parking lot, where Sarge lumbered up next to a rust-eaten beater. A handful of travelers picked through the meager stock offered at a food stand on the edge of the lot. To the side, a group of traders sat in the shade of an old shipping container, smoking and playing cards to pass the time. The sign for a water pump station caught Kay's eye. She'd gone through her supply faster than she anticipated on the road, the bottle sloshing about a quarter full at the bottom of her pack. "I'm filling up," Kay told Arlo while he checked Sarge's feet for injuries, running his palms over thick scales and between huge curving claws. "Back in a bit." A chain-link fence surrounded the station, secured by a locked gate next to a keypad and payment box. Kay thumbed in the number of gallons she needed and dropped a 10 coin into the slot. The gate beeped twice, then unlocked with a clang. As Kay approached the pump, a skinny, bearded man walked around from behind it and blocked her path, waving an oversized wrench.
"That'll be 40 pettas to use the pump today," he said.
Kay frowned. "Already paid at the gate."
"Yeah, well, you're gonna have to pay me too, sweetie."
"Why?" Kay glanced around the empty yard. "You own this place?"
"Why?" he echoed mockingly. "Don't matter to you, does it? 'Cause you ain't getting water either way unless you hand over those pettas like I asked."
There was something wild in the man's overbright eyes, something jerky in his movements, that struck Kay as dangerous. The desperation, the pall of starvation, was heavy on him, and Kay knew it too well. This far gone and anything, absolutely anything, was worth killing for. Kay was already reaching for the revolver at her hip, when footsteps shuffled across the dirt behind her, the silhouette of a desert dog casting her in shadow.
"Howdy, stranger,"
Arlo piped up, Sarge in tow. He dug around in his pockets and produced what looked like more than 4 coins, extending them to the man.
"You have a nice day now."
The man took the coins in twitchy fingers, stuffed them deep into his pocket, and with a parting glance at Kay's gun was outside the security fence in a few running steps, vanishing into the wind and sand. Kay reached roughly into her bag and pulled out her bottles, shoving them into the station's pump slots harder than necessary. "You didn't have to pay him," she snapped. Arlo hummed softly while the water dispensed in a slow trickle, and Sarge's internal pieces ticked. "He doesn't work here. Surely even a blind man knows that."
"Oh, yes," Arlo said serenely. "But he must be awful down on his luck to be sticking people up at a pump station.
Stupid is what that is."
"Sometimes people do stupid things when they've got nothing left."
Arlo turned his milky eyes on her, that grandfatherly smile peeking out from under the shifting folds of his robes.
"A little kindness can go a long way, Miss Jean, when people need it most."
Kay stuffed her filled bottles into her pack, slung it over her shoulder, and kicked the pump before turning away. Arlo was a fool. Didn't he know that snakes are always ready to strike, especially at outstretched hands? They spent the rest of the day traversing a deep gulch that split the land in two, descending one side, picking their way across the treacherous bottom littered with spent bomb casings, and climbing back up the other.
"Crazy," that they can fit into your arms when they're pups?
Arlo began, later in the evening while Kay unfastened the saddle and cleaned out Sarge's ears.
Of course, then they think they can always fit and you gotta stop them before they break your ribs.
They'd stopped to make camp as the sun began to set, on the edge of badlands that stretched the last 100 miles between them and Guerra. Towering, heavy clouds hung to the north, where flashes of dry lightning attacked the overheated earth. Sarge rolled around in sand still warm from the sun as Kay bit into her ration bar. The rations they carried were chalky, bitter, which was why at the last second Kay had bought something better at the trading post for the old man's last meal. She poured water over dehydrated vegetables and rice in a bag. Here. She handed it to him unceremoniously and pushed a fork into his hand. Eat it. It wasn't hot, but it would have to do. Arlo laughed with good-natured surprise, thanked her, and for a few minutes it was quiet but for the sound of his chewing and Kay's preparation of their night supplies.
It's beautiful, the way they bond for life,
he continued absently as Sarge scooted past, rubbing up against Arlo affectionately and leaving a trail in the sand.
That's the dog in them, I expect. Till death do us part, eh, Sarge?
Arlo gave a throaty laugh at the lizard's departing back.
Longer than marriage. You ever been married, Miss Zhang?
Kay undid her wrap, hair windswept and dusty, and brushed the dirt from her face. Once.
I lost my wife a few years ago to the bombings.
Arlo paused, then smiled sadly.
I suppose that makes it more than a few years ago, eh? There ain't been nations big enough to build proper bombs in near 20 years. I expect you're too young to have really known them.
Kay grunted and sat down beside him, leaning against the cargo stack. At the edge of her vision she could see Sarge wandering around in the dying light, big belly dragging on the ground.
Where's your husband?
Wife, Kay corrected. She looked at him sidelong through her eyelashes and frowned. Raiders got her. They took everything. The old man's face softened.
I'm sorry.
Me too, she said. And for once, she meant it. Kay loaded her gun by feel, the cylinder clicking into place audibly. Next to her, she felt Arlo freeze. I really am. His eyes looked in her general direction, then slowly back out towards the horizon.
Would you do an old man a service? Would you describe the sunset to me?
Kay blinked, and Arlo folded his hands neatly in his lap, face solemn.
It's been a long time since I've seen one, you know.
He licked his lips thoughtfully.
Never know when it'll be my last.
Kay tipped her head back heavily and swallowed. In a thick voice, she described every single shade in the sky. She told him how the horizon was yellow-orange like Sarge, but the clouds were bruised pinkish-purple. She told him how the moon was starting to rise and it was going to be full.
I do believe that's the most I've ever heard you speak, Miss Zhang.
Kay, she murmured. My name is Kay.
That's a nice name. Zhang.
You'd have to ask the forger.
Arlo
bowed his head, as if deep in thought, then lifted it again.
There's a pack of wild dogs up beyond the ridge just before the next pass, and they always scare Sarge. Heading a few miles east saves you the ordeal.
Kay grunted in affirmation and listened to her own heart beating. She watched Sarge sniffing the air in the distance, oblivious.
Also, Sarge's heart valve is due for maintenance at the end of the month. Forgetting could be deadly, so...
Arlo cleared his throat, voice breaking.
Best nobody forgets.
Kay was trying not to cry and failing. She lifted the gun, pressed the barrel right into the old man's temple. No missing, no suffering.
Wait until Sarge ain't looking,
Arlo murmured.
And you work hard to bond. Be real sweet. Commit to it. I don't want Sarge being alone.
Dying men weren't kind. Dying men were cruel and violent. Dying men... Kay was trembling fiercely, hot tears streaming down her cheeks, and it took several tries to press the cylinder release. The bullets dropped into the sand. "Christ," she said. A soothing hand came, shakily, to pat between her shoulder blades. Kay swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. She thought of the trail of bloodshed in her wake. She thought about Sarge wagging. "I wanted to get away. I couldn't. I thought—"
"You know,"
Arlo said, scratching his beard,
"there's longer routes out past Guerra. Haven't taken them in years since my sight started to go. Of course, they're riskier, but the payout more than makes up for it."
Kay stared at him uncomprehendingly. "I'm not actually a driver. You know that, right? I don't even pass the screening to buy a desert dog." Arlo's eyes crinkled, and he leaned in like someone about to tell a secret.
"Sarge is pregnant," he said. "I wasn't going to be able to afford keeping the pup, but with the right assistant—"
He folded his arms.
"Well, I reckon I'd take one in exchange for a year of sunsets."
Kay gave a watery smile that no one could see and watched Sarge's distant form dart after something in the dunes. "You would?" Arlo shifted, settling comfortably back against the cargo.
"Tell me about the orange again."
"Burnt sienna. It fades up into the clouds, where everything is pink."
Is there anything more quietly powerful than mercy? Today, Dre and Leanne present us with two sides of the same conceptual coin. The contract killer, holding the power of death, but deeply troubled by the outcome of their life choices. And the long-haul desert dog driver, with no power but the grace to not hold people's circumstances against them, even at great personal risk. When your back is completely against the wall, when you stand to risk what little you have left, it takes incredible character and emotional strength to show mercy. And it takes an incredible amount of mercy to forgive. But seriously, how cute was that giant lizard dog? Please join us next week for the beginning of our summer serial. We're showcasing an excellent novella throughout the remaining dog days of July and August. You won't want to miss it. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers, and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on iTunes, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion on the EA forum, forum.escapeartist.net, or visit us on Twitter at Cast of Wonders. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artist Incorporated and is brought to you by Assistant Editor Catherine Inskip, Assistant Editor and your host for today, Alexis Goebel, Associate Editors Tanya Vespalco, Amy Brennan, Alicia Caparoso, Trace Fontil, William Height Minor, Andrew K. Ho, Sean Proctor, Ray O, Susie Rodriguez, Carissa Sluss, Emma Smales, and Chris Tang. Audio producer Jeremy Carter, Community Manager Danny Daly, and our editor Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov and available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thanks for listening.